Most people try to change their habits by focusing on what they do, but the most powerful transformation happens when you change who you believe you are. Consistency becomes easier when your actions are not just things you're trying to do, but reflections of who you are trying to become. That's why identity-based habits are so effective. Instead of just saying, "I want to be consistent," your behavior then aligns with that belief. When your actions stem from your identity, there's less friction. You're no longer forcing yourself to act against the grain of who you think you are. You're acting in alignment with your self-position. And the more often you show up and follow through, the more you reinforce that identity. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you cast a vote for the type of person you want to be. And over time, those votes add up. They reshape how you see yourself. You're not just doing things, you're becoming someone. This shift from outcome-based goals to identity-based habits is subtle but powerful. When you say, "I want to lose weight," the focus is on a result. But if you say, "I'm the type of person who doesn't miss workouts," your focus shifts to process and identity. That shift is what builds lasting change, because results fluctuate, motivation comes and goes, but identity is stable. It grounds you. It gives you direction when everything else is uncertain. Consistency starts to feel natural when you stop thinking of habits as external tasks and start thinking of them as internal expressions. You're not just waking up early. You're someone who values discipline. You're not just eating clean. You're someone who takes care of your body. You're not just working hard. You're someone who honors your potential. That internal alignment reduces resistance. It builds momentum. It gives every action a deeper purpose. But identity is not something you find. It's something you create. You don't wait to feel like a disciplined person before you act disciplined. You act your way into that identity. You decide who you want to become. Then you start living in alignment with that decision. You show up even when it's uncomfortable. You act consistent even when it's inconvenient. And slowly you start to believe it. You start to embody it. The outer behavior creates the inner belief, and the inner belief sustains the outer behavior. The people who stay consistent over the long term aren't necessarily the most talented or the most motivated. They're the ones who know who they are, or at least who they're becoming, and they act in alignment with that vision every day. They build rituals, routines, and standards that match their identity. They protect that identity. They feed it. Because they understand that if you don't deliberately shape who you are becoming, your circumstances will do it for you. Your environment plays a much bigger role in your consistency than most people realize. We like to believe we have full control over our decisions, but the truth is, our surroundings silently shape our behavior every single day. If you want to be consistent, don't rely on willpower. Design your environment in a way that makes success the default option. It's not about making yourself stronger. It's about making the path easier. When your environment is aligned with your goals, the friction between you and the right action decreases. You no longer need to fight against distractions or temptations because you've removed them before the battle even starts. For example, if you want to read more, leave a book on your pillow or your desk instead of buried in a drawer. If you want to eat healthier, keep fruits and vegetables in plain sight and junk food out of reach. These subtle cues influence what you do. The way your room is organized, the apps on your phone, the people you surround yourself with, the structure of your daily routine. All of it either helps you stay on track or quietly leads you off course. Success becomes a lot more likely when you make the right actions easier and the wrong actions harder. This isn't just about physical space, it's also about mental and emotional environments. What kind of content are you consuming daily? What kind of conversations are you having? What messages are you reinforcing through repetition? If your mental environment is full of doubt, fear, and negativity, consistency will always feel like a struggle. But if your environment is filled with reminders of your goals, symbols of growth, and people who support your journey, consistency starts to feel like a natural extension of who you are. Designing your environment also means creating routines and systems that reduce decision fatigue. If you wake up each day and have to debate whether or not to go to the gym, you'll eventually burn out. But if you've pre-decided your workout time, laid out your clothes the night before, and built it into your schedule like an unbreakable appointment, you eliminate the internal debate. That structure becomes your support system. It doesn't drain your willpower, it preserves it. Your environment should reflect your commitment. Every element around you should send a message. This is who I am, and this is what I'm building. Because when your surroundings align with your goals, consistency doesn't rely on motivation or force. It becomes a natural response to the space you've created. The beginning of any task is where most people lose the battle. It's not that they can't finish, it's that they never truly start. The first 5 minutes are the most critical, because that's where resistance is strongest. Once you overcome that initial hesitation, momentum begins to build. The human brain hates transition, especially when moving from comfort to discomfort. But once you cross that threshold, everything becomes easier. Winning the start means taking control before your mind has the chance to talk you out of it. When you delay the beginning, your mind starts negotiating. It reminds you how tired you are, how unmotivated you feel, how much easier it would be to do something else. That mental chatter can be paralyzing, but if you can bypass it by simply committing to the first 5 minutes, you silence that voice before it grows loud. You don't need to commit to an hour-long workout. You just need to start stretching. You don't need to write a full chapter. You just need to open the document and type a few words. Once you're in motion, your brain shifts from avoidance to engagement. This technique works because it shifts your focus from the overwhelming big picture to a small, manageable action. The brain is far more likely to comply when the perceived effort is low. Starting small removes the weight of perfectionism and fear of failure. It gives you permission to begin without the pressure of finishing something perfectly. And once you begin, you often surprise yourself with how much you're willing to do. What starts as 5 minutes can turn into 30 or more, not because you forced it, but because you allowed yourself to get into flow. The start of your day sets the tone for everything that follows. If you wake up and immediately dive into distraction, it becomes harder to regain control. But if you have a system in place to win those first 5 minutes, stretching, journaling, walking, breathing, reviewing your goals, you start from a place of intentionality instead of chaos. That sense of control carries forward. It builds confidence. It reminds you that you're in charge of how you begin, and that gives you power over how the rest unfolds. Every consistent person understands this principle. They don't wait for motivation. They don't overanalyze or stall. They just begin. They know that action breeds clarity and energy, not the other way around. The first 5 minutes are about overcoming inertia. They're about showing your mind that you are the authority, not your mood, not your fear, not your laziness. It's a way of proving to yourself, every day that you are capable of starting, no matter how you feel. Make the beginning automatic. Don't rely on inspiration. Build rituals that trigger action before doubt can creep in. Prepare the night before. Remove all barriers to entry. Set a time, a place, and a sequence. The more you script the start, the less you have to think. And the less you think, the more you do. Tracking your progress is one of the most underrated tools for building consistency. When you measure what you're doing, even in small ways, you bring clarity to your effort. You no longer operate in a fog of uncertainty. You know where you've been, what you've done, and what's still left to do. That awareness creates accountability, and accountability strengthens follow-through. Without tracking, it's easy to lie to yourself. It's easy to say you've been working hard when you've actually been avoiding the hard work. But data doesn't lie. Numbers don't distort reality. They reveal it. Most people fail to stay consistent because they have no feedback system. They're guessing. They rely on feelings instead of facts. But your feelings are fickle. They shift with mood, sleep, weather, and stress. Some days, you'll feel like you're making no progress, even when you are. Other days, you'll feel overconfident when you've barely scratched the surface. That's why you need objective proof. You need to see the steps you've taken, even if they're small. Progress is motivating, but only if you can see it. When you track your behavior, your workouts, writing sessions, time spent studying, meals, or habits, you create a visual map of your effort. That map becomes evidence. It tells you, I'm still showing up. It doesn't have to be complicated. A notebook, a calendar, an app, or even tally marks on a wall can serve as a simple, powerful reminder. You're not just checking boxes. You're reinforcing your identity. Every mark is a commitment kept, a promise followed through, a step closer to who you want to become. And when you see a streak forming, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days, it becomes a game you don't want to lose. You build momentum, and momentum is a force multiplier. It turns small wins into bigger ones. And suddenly, what once felt like effort starts to feel like rhythm. Tracking also helps you identify patterns. You start to see when you're most productive, what environments support your focus, what routines work best. That awareness gives you the power to adjust before things spiral out of control. If you miss 2 days in a row, your tracking system tells you before the habit fades. If your performance dips, the data reveals it before excuses take over. You're not reacting blindly. You're responding with insight. There's also a deeper psychological shift that happens when you track your behavior. You begin to value your time more. You realize how much of it you waste when you're not intentional. Tracking forces you to confront reality. It removes illusions. And while that can be uncomfortable at first, it's also empowering. Because once you know the truth, you can do something about it. You're no longer operating in wishful thinking. You're grounded, you're focused, you're deliberate. Accountability transforms your private goals into public commitments, and that shift creates a powerful sense of responsibility. When you're the only one who knows your plans, it's easy to cut corners, delay action, or abandon the process altogether. But when someone else is aware of your intentions, it changes how you show up. You're no longer operating in silence. You're being witnessed. That presence, even if subtle, reinforces discipline in ways that internal motivation alone often can't. We like to think of ourselves as self-sufficient. But the truth is, humans are social creatures. We care about how we are perceived. We value our integrity, especially when others are watching. Having someone check in on your progress, even briefly, creates an inner pressure to follow through. It's not about fear or shame. It's about wanting to live up to the standard you've declared. When you tell someone you're going to do something, and they believe in you, that belief becomes fuel. You don't want to let them down. You don't want to break your word. That pressure, when channeled correctly, becomes powerful. Accountability doesn't have to mean having a coach or mentor watching your every move. It can be as simple as sharing your goal with a friend, joining a group that's pursuing a similar habit, or setting up a weekly check-in with someone who's on the same path. The key is consistency in the relationship. When you know someone will ask, "Did you do what you said you would?" It sharpens your focus. You start preparing for that conversation long before it happens. You do the work, not just for yourself, but for the commitment you've made to others. It also works both ways. When you hold someone else accountable, your own standards rise. You model discipline, not just for your own sake, but to be a reflection of what's possible. That kind of mutual support builds momentum. You feed off each other's energy. You build trust, respect, and a sense of shared progress. And in moments of doubt, when your internal drive begins to fade, that external structure holds you up. Sometimes accountability is found in structured systems. A workout partner, a mastermind group, a mentor, or an online community. Other times it's more personal. Telling your spouse, your children, your best friend what you're aiming to do. When the people you care about know your mission, you begin to embody it more seriously. You no longer think of it as optional. It becomes part of your identity, your story, your sense of responsibility to something larger than yourself. This is why some of the most successful people in any field build layers of accountability into their lives. Not because they're weak, but because they're wise. They understand that the human mind will always search for the path of least resistance, and that without a system to keep them honest, even the strongest intentions can fade. Accountability keeps the vision alive. It makes the invisible visible, and the future real in the present moment.
Perhaps one of the most misunderstood subjects in business. Leadership has nothing to do with rank. I know many people who sit at the highest levels of an organization who are not leaders. We do as they tell us because they have authority over us, but we do not trust them and we do not follow them. I also know people at low levels of organizations that have no formal authority, but they've made a choice. The choice to look after the person to the left of them, the choice